Hi folks, I'm Laird Landon. This episode is about caregiver grief, which is a very important concept that is underappreciated. We're going to do this sort of like a support group. We're going to have questions and I'll give some answers.
You know, in my last caregiver group, somebody said, it sounds like you're grieving. That kind of hit me out of the blue. I was miserable, but I didn't think I was grieving. Could I have been grieving?
It's true, we don't know we're grieving. In America, grieving is only associated with death, and we don't appreciate enough that we grieve throughout our lives. One of the ways we know we don't really appreciate grieving before death is there are no rituals for it. Think about what happens when someone dies. People give flowers, they attend services, they bring a casserole to the family who's left. They write a note. Do they do any of those things for caregivers? No. No wonder someone said, a researcher, America's caregivers do not get acknowledgement for their grief. The truth is, all humans grieve all throughout life. It is a natural process to adjust to loss. We grieved as children. Remember the first pet you had that had to be put down? I do. I was 8 years old. It's a little small Cocker Spaniel, black, white chest, white boots. I loved him. As a matter of fact, as an 8-year-old, I was closer to that animal than I was to any human being. And when we had to put him down, I can remember being at the dining room table, getting the news, and running to my room crying. Remember when one of your best friends moved away from elementary school? You were lost. You were grieving. The thing is, we grieve throughout life. Even as children, we cry, we get angry, we're sad, and sad means we retracted into ourselves, and then we came out, and we stumbled around, and we found a path forward, even joy. So you see, humans grieve throughout life. And when we are grieving for our loved ones as they decline, we grieve each time it matters to us. Whenever there is leaving, there is grieving. As we watch our loved ones slowly lose function, we grieve. It really helps if you can identify that you are grieving. If you can name it, then it's something that's out there that you can deal with. If it's not named, it's deep inside, and it is running around in your body and keeping you from functioning. You're crying and you don't know why you're crying. If you can name it, you can process it. You also have the chance, if you name it, to tell your family and your friends how you're feeling. If they know how you're feeling, they can much better appreciate where you are and provide you some comfort.
Sometimes I grieve and other times I don't. And why do I do that?
It's really hard to see your grief because your loved one is alive. He or she's standing right in front of you. It's also hard to see they're leaving because we cling to who they were. We want to stay in touch with who they were, and we miss how they're leaving slowly. They leave bit by bit. And a lot of the times you don't see the losses because you're holding on to who they were. These are the good times. But when they leave in a way that you can really notice, when they wander, when they get lost driving, when they don't remember the names of the people in their own family, those hit you very hard. There's another problem. Our loved ones with dementia can fake it, can't they? There's a Thanksgiving story that I like to tell. You get up early in the morning and you take care of Mom. You get her all ready, dressed, cleaned, with everything on in the right way. Then you come out and you finish the Thanksgiving dinner, and then the family arrives. And they have a wonderful time, and your mom is on. And when everyone leaves, somebody turns to you and says, Laird, I don't know what you're complaining about. Mom is just fine. And it really hurts, because the minute you close the door, you're going to spend another 3 hours scraping your mom off the ceiling and getting her back to bed and calm down. And they didn't even see it. In public, very often, dementia patients can hide their feelings. So it's very difficult, but this kind of grieving, where they're leaving us but they're alive, was first explained by Pauline Boss in 1999. She called it ambiguous loss. It's ambiguous because the person you're losing is alive physically, but they are leaving psychologically. And it's very hard for us to wrap our heads around that. And caregivers have a tremendous roller coaster that they go through, trying to manage the feelings for the person as they were and as they are now.
Our hospice worker used the term anticipatory grief, and then I've heard ambiguous grief. What's the difference?
No, anticipatory grief is different from ambiguous grief. Anticipatory grief is when we're grieving about your loved one's death in the future. You're anticipating the death, and that causes us naturally to grieve. There are a number of times when caregivers might have anticipatory grief. For example, a diagnosis. It's a very common experience to hear your loved one has just been given a death sentence, and we grieve for that. Another time that we tend to grieve as caregivers in an anticipatory way is when we put our loved one into hospice, because putting someone into hospice requires us and 2 doctors to agree that death is likely within the next 6 months. That obviously sets off grief about what will life be without them. Placement can do this as well, because placement isn't necessarily close to death, but it is a clear dividing line between when you're caring for them full-time and someone else is. So if you think about those examples, those are times when we're clearly thinking about death. But ambiguous grief is different. It's about all the little losses, all the losing of your person as you go through time. Caregivers, in fact, have both kinds of grief. There are examples of ambiguous grief too. One is when they just don't laugh at jokes the way they used to, or when they don't give you a kiss with the same kind of passion and meaning that they did before. Another is when all they want to do is stay home because they're embarrassed to go out and draw attention to themselves. If they talk too much, sometimes they just keep talking and they interrupt. And so there are lots of times when you're with them that they just don't act the way they used to. Those are examples of when ambiguous grief is possible.
Betty brought up grief. I know that I've grieved throughout my life, but this is different. Why is it so hard?
Sure, we've talked about some already, but there are some major categories that cause people to grieve throughout life, but caregivers can run into. The first one is, particularly a diagnosis, all of our assumptions about the world and the way it works are very much rattled. When my wife was diagnosed, I said, wait a minute, this isn't right. I'm supposed to die first. Look, we just retired. You mean I don't get to spend any time with my wife traveling? All of the things we had planned for the future have been thrown asunder. So our world and the way it works just doesn't seem right. Frankly, many of us who haven't experienced dementia before don't even know what it is. We go to the library and spend a lot of time saying, what is this? How did they get it? All of those feelings are related to our assumption of the real world and how to adjust to get there. Another is that we lose physical intimacy. And I don't mean sex with this. This is very strong for parents too. The way they look, the way their voice sounds, the way they smell when they get out of the shower, the way they grin at you. Those things have tremendous meaning for us. And as they lose themselves, one of the things we know about dementia, they have, what the doctors call flat affect. They just sit there staring all the time. And you look at that and you say, that's just not who they were. The way they hold your hand. Those are things of physical intimacy that are really important in knowing who someone is. And of course, sexual intimacy is a real thing if this was a partner or a wife or a husband. And sex has so much meaning for us and our connection with them. It's the way we were safe with them. It's the way we knew that we were loved. It's the way that we know that our future is secure and we will always be together. It is very sad when caregivers of people with dementia are lying in bed at night, can't fall asleep, and they don't even know who the person is next to them, who doesn't respond. We also have a loss of hope for recovery. At some point, and this is often different for each of us, at some point we maintain the hope that they will live a long time, that we can find the cure, we can find something that will keep them with us. But somewhere during the journey, we always come face to face. It could be when they are placed. It could be when they go into hospice. We face the terrible thought, they are not going to recover. They are not going to come back. And that takes a lot of heart out of us. Finally, there's anticipatory griefs, as we said. And then I want to talk a little bit about the loss from death itself, which is what we all identify with grief. Caregivers actually grieve after death qualitatively differently than people who lose people to death for other reasons. One of the reasons, of course, is we've been with them for so long and we've thought about their death so that when it comes, it isn't as shocking as it might have been for a difficult car accident or something of the like. The other is, after that long time, we're exhausted. And they are in such terrible physical shape that it's not at all uncommon to feel relieved when they're gone. We feel relieved. We say they're in a better place. They aren't struggling. They aren't fighting. They aren't falling. And of course, we have to say, we're relieved for ourselves too. We are done with that. That, of course, makes us feel guilty, doesn't it? We immediately say, oh, I'm thinking about myself. Forget that for a minute. The truth is, this has taken a heavy toll on us. And to have that Chinese drip torture stop should naturally feel relieved. Another thing that causes is that sense of relief, is that it often causes us to want to get out, break out of prison, and do something. And we can get some pushback from our friends. They can say, wait a minute, you haven't grieved long enough. Wait a minute. Remember in the 1800s, a widow had to wear black and stay indoors for a year. After that, if they were good, they could wear purple and they could go to lunch only with their closest female-only friends. We're well beyond those days, but still there are norms in society. We still have friends and neighbors say, you haven't grieved enough. I've got a story that is very powerful. A very good friend of mine cared for his wife for 22 years with MS. When she died, he found someone else and wanted to get married, and it was only 9 months later. He told his best friends, and to a man they said, oh, no, you can't, no, it's too soon. Wait a year. You're acting emotionally. You haven't grieved enough. This friend of mine is a very strong guy, and he looked right at him, and he raised his voice, and he said, oh, isn't 22 years enough? He got it. He was grieving the whole time. He was ready to move on. Others weren't. Finally, it's important to understand that we may delay what I call summing up. You know, whenever someone leaves our lives, we spend quite a bit of time going over the relationship, how we met them, how we grew together, when we got married, if it was that, what your first childhood memories were of your parents. And that summing up helps us keep them with us. It helps us remember them. It helps us resolve the small differences we have and the arguments and let them go. But for caregivers, I've found many of us don't do that summing up for a while because we're trying to get a good night's sleep and because our immediate memories are of all the bad things that we've been through together with them while they've been dying. But after a period of time, for me it was a year, I was able to relax enough and go look over the life I had with my wife, and it really helped me a great deal. So if you have any need to delay thinking about it, that's okay. That's okay. So we caregivers grieve in a different way.